Hello everyone, just want to tell you about our new purchase. I've just bought a Pavoni Europiccola. It's a pre-millennium version. So people who watch my channels, my videos, have known that I absolutely love this Flair machine. Being a manual lever machine, you have very good control, and I've got my process down so that it's very easy to use. And what I've always wanted to try was one of these Pavonis, and I finally managed to buy one. So this one, these are units that are designed in like the 1960s, but this unit here is around 1990, 1985, 90, somewhere around there. So this cost me about $800 Australian. So that's about 600 US, I guess, in working order. So it was good, but it was difficult to control. So this video is all about what's it like from someone who can use a Flair quite well to going to a Pavoni. What are the things that I've noticed? What are the things I'd had to change? How did I make it work? So there were a number of modifications I did. The first one was putting on a pressure gauge. This was a piece of cake. You just buy a pressure gauge, screw it in, nothing to it. I also replaced all the gaskets inside it. That's also very easy on this machine. You can basically undo some bolts here, pull this whole unit out. You can undo the bolts on the top and everything comes out, and there's gaskets to replace, a bit of greasing to do, and it's very easy to service, which is why these things just keep going and going for years and years. I also put in this Bong Isolator. So this is a thing that you can buy that changes this head from being steam heated to being water heated, which makes it very much more controllable. So the main problem when I first got this was that it would just get hot. The first cup that you made was great. The following cups, it was just too hot. And I knew this because I put on a temperature strip on the group head. And if you'll notice, it's the same temperature strip that I have on the Flair unit, which you can buy from Flair, which are absolutely great. So here it shows you by the colour what the temperature is. Now with this Bong Isolator, what you can do is you can just pump the handle and watch the colours change. It's a bit hard to pump this backwards. So you can see it's 75 degrees now. If I pump a little bit more, we're getting up to 80, 85, 90, etc. So it's very easy to get the temperature that you want. And the second cup, third cup, fourth cup, they all can stay in the same temperature range. So you've got good control of that. Once you've got good control of that, you can make good coffee. Before that is rather difficult. The other thing I did was I bought a bottomless portafilter. So this is good in two ways. One is the Flair users would know that having a bottomless portafilter, you can tell if you've prepared your puck well, because you'll easily see if there are if it's bad distribution, because you'll get little squirts come out. So that's great. The other thing it does is, because you don't have the spouts sticking out the bottom, you get a little bit more room here for a cup to fit, because it is actually a bit cramped for cups. The other thing I did when I bought the bottomless portafilter is I bought a larger portafilter, so it holds more. The dose I usually go for is about 14 grams. You can dose it up a few more grams higher, but about 14 grams. So what I do is grind my coffee. I have a little cup, just tip it in. I do my WDT, which is a homemade WDT out of some acupuncture needles. Give it a tap. Tamp it. And now what we do, which is what Flair do with their latest Flair 58, is I've bought a puck screen. So this is about 1 millimetre thick puck screen. You just slide it on top, and this helps quite a bit. What happens when you lift the handle here is water from the boiler shoots in through a pipe into here, and it comes in with a bit of force. It's quite easy to actually sort of disturb the puck with the force of the water coming in. The other thing that can happen is as you pull the handle up, you can also disturb the puck because it sucks the air up through the puck into the machine as you lift the handle up. So puck screens really help. So next thing that I do is I lift this up. So rather than suck most of the air through the puck, I'll get most of it right this way. Then we'll put the portafilter in, put my cup in, and now if I lift it all the way to the top, water comes in here at this pressure, at the boiler pressure, which I've got set for about 1.4 bar. This is higher than the boiler pressure normally is, but I've modified this machine slightly to make it a higher pressure. I'll talk about that in a moment. But here you can see it starts dripping, and if I look underneath, I can see it's pretty well spread all over the puck. So that's our pre-infusion done easily. If not quite enough pressure to pre-infuse, obviously you can just slowly, lightly push it to try and get a little bit more pre-infusion. If you lift it up again, that's what they call a Fellini. That just allows a little bit more water to get in to make longer shots. But with this shot, I've got about 14 grams of coffee, and when I push the handle, I should get about 30 grams of coffee come out. It's a little bit hard to do at this angle. Okay. So one other thing I'd noticed from Flair is it's a little bit more spongy with this handle. You don't quite get the feedback that you do with a Flair. So you feel like you haven't got quite as much control over the pull, but you've got enough. There is actually a modification you can buy to handle this, but we have a nice shot at this stage, so you can see that looks great. I have to put a cup under here because there's no three-way valve, there's no pumps, there's no anything on this machine, so it does tend to drip a little bit afterwards. Then it's time to steam milk. So this is the main reason why I love this machine over the Flair. In fact, I haven't even used the Flair since I bought this machine. I'm going to have to turn the machine around to do the milk, I'm afraid. Okay. So we get plenty of steam. So one thing I did when I bought this machine is I had to replace the 3-hole tip, steam tip that it comes with, for a single hole steam tip. So the single hole makes it much easier to steam the milk. The 3 holes, it's just too hard to get it swirling. It's it's quite difficult. Basically you end up with foam just sitting on top and not very well incorporated. But when you have the pressure changed to 1.4 bar, like I have it, and the single hole tip, the milk is now really easy to control. And it's just like a normal espresso machine. So, we have our milk. Let's see how well I can pour. Okay, so that is really nice microfoam, and it makes a really good cup of coffee. So I might just mention some of the other mods that I did. Originally this one came with 2 heating coils in the boiler. So there's a 200 watt heating coil and a 1000 watt coil. And the idea was you had a switch here that would change from the 200 watt to the 1000 watt. You'd use the 200 watt to pull your espresso shot, and then you would change it to the 1000 watts when you're going to steam milk. And it has a relief valve here, and this relief valve was set originally to around 0.8 bar, so that you would have full power going to the boiler, and this would limit the pressure to 0.8 bar. But you'd have a lot of steam coming out here, which I found very distracting. So what I did was I bought a new coil to this boiler, took off the old boiler coil, put on the new one, and the new one had space for a pressurestat. So the pressurestat turns the electricity on and off on the coil. So now I've only got a single coil of 1000 watts, and the pressurestat automatically turns the pressure on and off, and it has a screw adjustment, so I can adjust what pressure the boiler sits at what point does the electricity turn off and on. So I have adjusted that so that I've just turned it off, but it would normally sit at around 1.4. I also had to change this pressure relief valve to make it a little bit higher. So what I found is that in my socket set, my just normal socket set I had I could fit a spark plug socket over this it's got to fit sort of inside this collar to undo this. So I put a spanner on the outside nut, loosened that off, pulled it out, and it's just a spring with a seal on the end, and the spring just fits into a little hole. So all I did was I bought a number of washers that would fit into the hole that the spring sits in, and I ended up with about 5 little stainless steel washers in there, which made the spring just a little bit more squashed, which made it operate at a slightly higher pressure. So now I find that when it's up to pressure, which is about 1.4 bar, this is just slightly hissing, just the smallest amount of steam comes out. And that's good because it gets rid of any false pressure, any air that you might have in your boiler. It's also a bit of a reminder that the machine's turned on because it makes a slight noise, but it's not a distracting amount of noise. And at that higher pressure with the Bong Isolator, you don't have any trouble with overheating. You can quite easily control the temperature. So the next trick is with taking the portafilter out. Because there's no 3-way valves, there is pressure in here, and the pressure has to leak out through the portafilter. So you've got to give it a minute or so before you try and take this off, otherwise the pressure will release suddenly, and the first few times it's spurted coffee grounds everywhere. When I bought the puck screen, that made it a lot less likely for it to spray anyway, but by then I'd actually worked out part of the trick. One of the tricks is you just lift this lever up a little bit to reduce some pressure before you try and take this off. And then it comes off with no drama. You can just kind of tap it vertically and get the puck screen off again easily, and then we just knock this out. Usually I put this in and just lift it up and let the water pressure pump some water through it to clean it, and then just quickly wipe it out. So in terms of workflow, it's very easy workflow. It's very quick. It's much easier than this. If I wasn't having milk, then the Flair would be enough. But because I really like to have milk coffee, and because this heats the water for me, and I have good control over the head, to me this is just miles ahead. One other thing I might mention, these are 49.5mm portafilters for what they call the pre-millennium version of these La Pavonis. Pre-millenniums are the ones before the year 2000, made before the year 2000. Post-millennium ones, they have a slightly larger portafilter, so 51mm portafilters instead of 49.5. So you obviously can do slightly larger coffee shots, but I believe all of this part of it and all of this is all still exactly the same size. So yeah. The other thing with this is that you put the water in here in the boiler, and you can see on the sight glass that my level's down to here. This is all the water you've got. If you run out of water, which for me, I can do 4 cups with milk quite easily, maybe 5. If you do more than 5 cups in a row, you're going to want to fill this again. You can't fill this if the pressure's showing that it's got pressure in it. So you really have to then let the steam out, let it go all the way down to 0 before you can before you can take this off and put any water in. If you take this off when there's pressure in there, you're running the risk of getting badly burnt. So, and this is hot. I should also mention that. If you've got kids in your house, that maybe not so much a great machine for you, because this is too hot to touch. This boiler is too hot to touch. I can touch at the front here quite well. That's just nice and warm. I could probably warm cups on this area here. This is too hot to touch here. So it's okay here. It gets too hot back here. And definitely this boiler itself is super hot. So that's something else to consider. One thing I might mention, this one has a removable steam tip. So you can see the single hole tip that I've put on. I found that this was very floppy, so I just put a fibre washer. This is just a little fibre washer on here, just to make it a bit tighter. So now it'll hold its position around this sort of angle, or maybe down here, whereas without that washer this just flops around everywhere. It's a little bit difficult to control. But for me, I love this machine. It's nice and small, smaller than my coffee machine that I used to have. It does coffee just as well as the coffee machine I used to have. The coffee's just as good as this, as far as I can tell. You've got good control of temperature. I should say that this temperature on here is not exactly the temperature that the water's going to be, because the water in the tank starts off at like 115 Celsius. And as it comes into here, as you lift the handle, it flash boils and drops the temperature, and then it mixes with the temperature of the group head. And this is just the temperature of the group head. So this is related to the actual water temperature that goes through, but it's not exactly the same. But it still gives you a guide. You just go by taste, you know. Obviously go for hotter temperatures, for lighter roasts, and see how you go. About the longest shot I managed to get out of here was about 40 grams out. So, and I usually put about 14 grams in. So in terms of ratio, you are limited a bit in how long ratios you can do, but that's really about the only limitation that I could see. Yeah, so this is my new love. I'll still use the Flair when I go travelling. Maybe I might use it at the office, take it to the office easily and use it there. But this is my go-to machine. I even use this on holidays. Last time I went on holidays, I took this with us because it's so small. I could easily pack it. It only uses 1,000 watts, and my little teardrop van that I've got has a 1,000 watt inverter in it, so I've got power for it to run. So yeah, that's it. I should say that we can buy these in Australia for about $1,100. So I paid $800 for a unit that's made in 1990. I probably paid at least $300, the difference in price, by getting all of these extra little mods and making it really controllable. But I guess even if I bought a new one, I'd probably want to have, you know, bought a few things like this Bong Isolator and the bottomless portafilter and the single hole tip anyway. But just be prepared. If you buy one of these, you want to be someone who enjoys pulling things apart, tinkering it, servicing it yourself, and being prepared to put in a few little mods to make it work for you the way that you want it to work, because brand new unit is a little bit hard to control. There's also talk about maybe the quality control of the more recent units is not as good as the quality control of the old ones. For example, inside here, the new ones have a plastic chamber. So where the cylinder goes up and down inside, that chamber is made of plastic, whereas in this unit it's all metal. You can buy modifications, aftermarkets, to replace the plastic sleeve with a metal one, but that's the kind of things that are slightly different with old and new ones. But I love it the way it is now. It's great. It works really well. And when it comes to buying a Flair 58 or one of these, I prefer this by far, just because it has the milk and the water heating and the temperature control all in one. Anyway, tell me what you think. I think it's great. Yeah, I think it's great. All right, enjoy.